So I was already up here, gave a little background on myself. But before I came to Puppet Labs, I was a Windows sysadmin. My job was basically to roll out SQL Server clusters at healthcare hospitals around the country. And we did pretty much all of that manually. And it was about as awesome as you would expect doing all that stuff manually would be. Actually, it kind of sucked. And it was really like, it was literally all manual, and I was like, hey guys, why don't we use PowerShell for any of this stuff? Look at how I can do all this stuff. And they're like, take a step back. You're crazy, right? And it was one of those environments. So then, moving on from that job, moved into Puppet. When I started at Puppet about 18 months ago, I think I mentioned this in my last demo, we had about 16 modules on the Forge for Windows. Usually folks were like, Puppet on Windows, is that a thing? Like, is that something that we should do? Is that smart? Because everybody knows, like on Linux, it just makes sense, right? Config files, all those different pieces, it just makes sense. And so there's a lot of kind of misinformation out there. There's a lot of apprehension about using a tool like Puppet on a Windows system. So I want to show you that it's not as scary as you might think. And so all of this sort of stuff, and it's actually pretty dang awesome. We have some really great Windows support out there in the product today. I've told folks that we can literally do anything on a Windows system that you can do via PowerShell, which is everything, right? And we have some really awesome integrations with future Microsoft products. So things like DSC is something that Puppet's integrated in. And we're going to talk about Chocolatey here in a little bit. So we're going to get a little crazy and talk Chocolate a little bit. But really, so let's start off here. So when we were deploying SQL Server, really it breaks down into two things, right? Usually it's a database server, it's an app server, or a web server. You're either installing SQL Server, you're installing IIS, or it's some sort of .NET thing. That is about 99% of all Windows deployments. And really at the end of the day, those things are registry keys, you're modifying files, you're turning on Windows roles and features, right? And I wish I could just yum install something, right? And why doesn't Windows have a package management utility? It's infuriating. But we have a solution for that. And we'll talk about that in just a little bit. So again, Windows is a first-class citizen within Puppet. We talk about this a lot, and we like to hammer this home quite a bit. We now have a dedicated Windows team. We've released a whole bunch of content that we'll get to here in just a little bit. And it's really a great product for managing Windows. Much better than the SCCMs of the world, which are, they're expensive, they're cumbersome, and quite frankly, they're not that awesome. So let's look at a couple of the modules in particular that really help you start getting started with managing a lot of your Windows infrastructure using Puppet. So the first one is the Windows Registry module. So this is actually a Puppet Enterprise supported module. This lets us create, delete, modify, pretty much do whatever we need to registry keys. Each of these registry key values are all individual resource items within your reports that Puppet's monitoring. So if we think back to the demo that we just did, each of those little line items in a report, we have a registry key if that thing were to ever change. Question?
Can you actually pull that from the fact?
You absolutely can. So these registry keys can be fact values. One of the other really cool things, and let's jump over to a nifty Windows box here. You guys probably can't see that in the back, huh? No, I didn't think so. Let me change this. Oops. Let's just get crazy with it. Oh, a little better? At least? Yeah? All right, cool. So if I want to do something like Puppet, remember when we were doing like all that Puppet resource command, right? I'm a huge fan of that. I love the ability to be able to discover current settings on a system because I hate typing, right? I'm a sysadmin who hates typing. I like to be as lazy as possible when I'm writing this code, right? I see some thumbs up, so we got some fans in the audience. So here, I'm just typing in Puppet resource, and I can do things like registry key if I want to. If I have a particular registry key where I know the tree that it's in, and Puppet will give me the current state of it. So what it's going to do is it'll actually output that example if I wanted to.
That's cool.
So now when we start talking about these handcrafted Windows systems that we have out there, right, we want to capture this, right? Maybe my application is just a whole bunch of DLLs and a bunch of registry keys, right? That's very, very common. Well, how do you version something like that? Well, now you can start using Puppet code to version those types of things, where now these are in Git somewhere, right? They're tracked via those different commits, and we get the visibility and the reporting out of each of them. So pretty cool stuff. And again, this is a supported module. So this is something where Puppet Labs owns this. So we're creating it, we're testing it, and we're also offering support around it. So pretty neat. Chocolatey, my favorite thing in the world. And you have to use the inflection when you say chocolatey, because it's pretty cool. So who knows what chocolatey is? Cool, wow, actually that's pretty awesome. So for those who don't know, Chocolatey is a package management utility for Windows. So it uses PowerShell to install and version different packages, and we actually have a provider for it. So let's look at some Chocolatey stuff. So first and foremost, let's go out to the interwebs. This is always dangerous. So this is the Chocolatey site. Basically, again, it's using PowerShell to install packages. There are something like 3,000 packages out there. Let's see, let's say we want to install Firefox. How's that? I cannot type. 4 times the charm. Firefox. It becomes a single command to install Firefox on a Windows system, right? I could install these via Puppet, but to do that, I would have to pass in a bunch of install options, right? I want to make sure that, I accept the EULA. I want to silently install this. I want to do all these certain things. Instead, we could build a package out of it with Chocolatey and then just do a Chocolatey install Firefox. Now I can ensure the version, I can version these Chocolatey packages, I can do all sorts of stuff. And that's where, now instead of all that additional complexity that Windows likes to make us do, because, no, I don't want to use a GUI for this, right? Go away. Now we can start to leverage Chocolatey for this. So, on the Forge, we have a module for Chocolatey. And for those of you who are like, man, this is super awesome, I can't wait to get home and try this, and you install the module and it doesn't work, the reason for that is because this just sets up the provider. So this just allows Puppet to say, I will leverage an existing Chocolatey installation to install these packages. We still have to install Chocolatey itself. Before I was just chatting with the creator of Chocolatey. His name is Rob Reynolds. He's a very nice guy. He's one of our developers at Puppet Labs. Currently we're going to be releasing a Chocolatey module here Q2 or Q3, we're not quite sure. That's going to install it, set up the provider, and it's going to do one other cool thing behind this curtain here that I'll get to in just a second. But essentially this is going to set up the provider. So now you can do things like this. So we have a package resource, right? Just like we saw in Linux. Oh, sorry, is there a question?
Yeah. The provider, that's installed on the endpoint, right?
So the provider is installed on the master just like a module. And then what happens is, so when an agent checks in to the master, there's a thing called plugin sync where Puppet will say, hey, there's this new content, there's this new provider out there, this is what that looks like and that's how it works. Yep, so that'll essentially, that functionality gets shipped down to the agent. So, package provider, just like we saw in Linux, right? This code is almost identical, but instead here we could just say, Chocolatey, ensure installed, provider, Chocolatey, right? And now I'm just telling Puppet that instead of trying to use the Windows APIs and all that stuff, just use Chocolatey. So let's take a look at some of this code on our master. That's big enough in the back, right? Just kidding. I know it wasn't. Let's see, let's make that even bigger. Is that okay? Is that better? Yep. Cool. All right, so let's go ahead and crack open some code. Let's see. Baseline. Cool. So, oh god, that's not going to work, is it? Sorry, just a second, guys. We have an SSH into this box, and we'll use this color profile because it's a little better. Cool, so what I'm gonna show right now, is a piece of code that uses Chocolatey to set up a Windows system. So I've called this my baseline. So this is basically, let's pretend I'm setting up a developer's workstation, or I'm provisioning a new Windows box, and there are certain things that I want on it, whether it's a SQL Server database or an IIS web server. Don't care, right? Well, in this case, we're able to set meta parameters for each of our resource types. So here I'm saying, if it's a Windows system, I don't care what you're doing. I want you to use Chocolatey for the installation of that package. And now, to install Firefox, Notepad++, 7-zip, Git, it's 4 lines of code, right? Pretty awesome. And this also allows me to version these things. Versioning in the Windows API sucks, right? It's horrible. Yes, Windows guy knows what I'm talking about. This allows me to set my own version for my Chocolatey packages, because it's not the package I'm installing, it's the Chocolatey package that I've created that's getting versioned. And that might have all sorts of different things in it. Let's look at a quick package that's not installed via Chocolatey. And back out. So I've got some stuff that's going to install .NET. I know, right? This is what it looks like to install .NET on a Windows Server 2008 machine. So first I got to source the file from somewhere, right? Executable, setting all the permissions, all that good stuff. And this is what it. So yeah, it's not super crazy, right? It's by no means one line of code to install it, right? But still I have to know what the install options are. Every application accepts a different set of install options, and it differs whether it's an executable or an MSI, right? All sorts of different things. So we can actually bypass all this and just put it in Chocolatey. Pretty cool stuff. So for all my Chocolatey packages, right now I'm actually having it go to that chocolatey.org site and pull those down. What's the problem there? Security, right? It's a public package. Like, what do I do with my developers.net app? Like, how do I don't want to put that on chocolatey.org, right? That doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. So we have some code that's available that actually allows you to set up an offline Chocolatey repository. It essentially uses IIS to set that up. Let's go ahead and crack that code open. Just go back a couple levels here. So Chocolatey server. Cool. So this turns a Windows server into an offline Chocolatey server. So this is a private Chocolatey server for me. So this is basically using IIS, stands up IIS server, all that good stuff. Then you'll notice we're able to set up all of our app tools all in Puppet code, right? So we're configuring a Windows IIS server. Even folks who have never managed a Windows server before, you can probably figure out what's going on, right? You don't need to know PowerShell to know this stuff. You don't need to know those individual operating system nuances to be successful with Puppet, which is one of the things that I really liked about it. But the really neat thing here, we have this ACL module that allows us to set permissions and granular permissions on individual shares and all of that good stuff. So now I'm hosting it internally. I'm setting who can access it, who can do what within my Chocolatey server. I host all of my packages here, and then I just point Chocolatey at it. Pretty cool stuff. Now I have a package management utility that I can version. It's fast, it's easy, it's all those different things, and it makes your Windows admins much happier. Any questions on Chocolatey? I get really excited. I get almost a little Steve Ballmer when I start talking about Chocolatey. Go ahead.
So, Steve Ballmer. So, creation, let's say getting our developers to actually use this, our .NET developers to use this.
Yep.
How do we present that to them? Is there integration to other development tool sets outside of the Windows realm?
So that's a great question. So what I've done with these in the past is, at the end of the day, a Chocolatey package is just a bunch of config files. It's really just like an XML metadata file that points to different commands to install your stuff and where to get all those things.
package?
I've templated it before in Puppet code. So created a Puppet manifest where you pass in a parameter and it actually builds Chocolatey packages for you. So you can do that sort of stuff because all it is, it's a template, right? So if I could pass variables into it, I can actually have it build a custom template for me. So that works. That doesn't work in a lot of, in some development life cycles, right? Because maybe your developers don't have access to that code or whatever that might be. Some of the folks I've worked with, they just have their developers submit their code to their Puppet admin, and the Puppet admin builds the Chocolatey package. That way, and then you version it. It kind of depends on how your organization is structured, but it is, there's just a lot of ways to do it. One of the really neat things that I was talking to Rob about is it isn't, it could be more user-friendly to create a Chocolatey package right now. And what I would love to see personally is maybe like an integration into Geppetto, which is our IDE for writing Puppet code. So stuff like that. And I think having Rob on our team allows us a lot of that kind of future development in terms of creating those packages and that sort of thing. Cool. Any other questions on Chocolatey? Go ahead.
So the Windows Puppet core stuff, have you looked into integrating that through like SCOM, which used to be MOM, as well as like SCCM?
Yeah, no, and that brings up a really good point. So SCCM, SCOM, all of those tools, they're great. You know, for some things, you know, for the configuration management portion of those, I think Puppet's leaps and bounds ahead. And there's a huge benefit of using or in having your Windows infrastructure in the same tool as your Linux stuff, right? You break down those silos, you get a central reporting, central inventory service, all that good stuff, right? But there are a couple things that SCCM does great. It's really good at provisioning new Windows systems. That's something that Puppet is still developing. And it's also pretty good at patching. When you start talking about a configuration management tool that's very end state focused, that assumes that you know what end state you want your thing to be in. With patches, since it's always a surprise what the next patch is going to be, you don't know that end state, and so you can't declare it, right? So there's some fundamental disconnects there between Puppet and in a patching scenario. So those are usually where we kind of carve out responsibility between the two. I can say that the patching piece, and let me just go ahead and pull up trusty Google here. This is the beta code that we're currently working with for a Windows patching story. This should be released later on this year. But it's essentially setting up it's using WSUS, right? So pretty soon I think we'll have a pretty good story for it. Right now, that's kind of where we draw those lines. But you know, it's just all about you know, what we feel is Puppet's best for configuration management. Those other tools are pretty good at those other things for now. Cool. Anything else? Awesome. Okay. So Chocolatey is pretty cool. Next, Windows roles and features. Oh, go ahead.
For the role-based access control in the enterprise console,
Yeah.
is there a role that I can provision for consumers, so for application developers to be able to apply their own Puppet scripts to install the Chocolatey packages?
Yes.
Cool.
Yep. And that role-based is still being built out in terms of its granularity, but right now you can absolutely do that.
Cool.
Yep. Cool. So the next really neat thing, roles and features, right? I mean, this is kind of, especially in a Windows Server 2008 and above environment, like this is the way you do it. So Puppet's going to interact through the DISM application, or I guess it's not the right word, but whatever, to basically turn on and off Windows roles. And we also have a community contributed module from the folks at OpenTable. They do the online restaurant reservation stuff. That basically turns on and off Windows features. So we're able to say, I want these Windows features on or I want them off. The best part about a lot of these modules, and I'm going to go back to this a lot because I told you I hate typing, is being able to use a lot of these modules to discover things about a system, right? So we've been doing the Puppet resourcing all the time. You're probably thinking, this guy's weird about this. But it's really cool. So like with the DISM module, I can type in Puppet Resource DISM, and here's all of the Windows roles and features and what state they're in, right? So now I can say, hey, the Windows Server backup, it's absent on this one. Why is it present on another one, right? So we can start to audit a lot of these things. And that's because a lot of these modules are gonna set up a provider for you, so you can start to query a lot of those different things. SQL and IIS. So this is huge, right? This is probably like 80% of the things that Windows admins do. So the SQL Server module is now, it's a supported module, and this was something that was just recently released a couple months ago. This allows us to do SQL Server 2012 and up. There is some stuff out there for legacy SQL Server installations as well. Essentially, this allows us to, in Puppet code, start to define what a SQL Server instance is. This is going to get you up to the point where your database is ready to accept schema and data. So this isn't going to, deploy, it's not going to do like injection of data or any of that sort of stuff. It's going to get you to that point. So changing SA login and, I want to move where my logs are stored and all that good stuff, all in Puppet code. The IIS site is also, go ahead.
So the SQL
Yep.
module, you said that does support specifying what partition you want, your data, your logs, your temp disk, everything?
Yes, so what this one essentially does, I believe it uses an answers file to do all that stuff.
Standard SQL answer.
Yep,
file?
exactly.
Cool.
Yep.
That's awesome.
And then we got the IIS one. This was another one that was contributed by the OpenTable folks. This one's an approved module. So this is one that we've gone through and stamped with our stamp of approval. And again, being able to more granularly set all those different things, right? You can really build up all the different components that you need. ACLs, this one was huge. When I first started, I was like, wait, I can't set those in Puppet? That's so weird. This is much cleaner, right? You can do all this through PowerShell or through little commandlets, but this is just much cleaner, right? Again, key pair values for all those things, that consistency that you're looking for between your Linux and your Windows environments. Very similar, and you can get as granular as you want. One of the really cool things that I've seen with this, especially recently, all the Windows admins are probably going to relate with this. Windows Server 2012, I absolutely hate how I have to mount the ISO to install any of the things, .NET and all that stuff. I hate that so much. And so that's a huge pain. We have a new module we're going to release here called Mount ISO, so you can start mounting Windows ISOs. But then you need to set the permissions on them, right? And I can't just say, ISO mode, give it a mode, because it's according to Puppet, it's like a virtual mount, right? It's not like really a thing. And so we could use ACLs for those things.
Will that do NDFS and
Yes.
share?
It will, yep. Because that's the only way to do those, right? All right. So many people, I'm not gonna hate on your PowerShell scripts, right? I've got my PowerShell scripts that I keep close and dear. One of the things that I like to say here is I use this as a catch-all, right? It's the same in the Linux world. There's a lot of things that you can do, but sometimes it's just like, hey, why doesn't Puppet have something for this yet? I have a bash script that does it very well. Well, until you can kind of tease those things out and you get comfortable with the tool and creating new types of providers and all that good stuff, we have this exec command that allows us to execute scripts. And it's the same thing with PowerShell. In this case, we can pass it a PS file. We can also just execute raw PowerShell if we want. We have a lot of flexibility here, and this really kind of fills in that 10 to 20% gap that might be missing from, this is all the things that I can do within my Puppet Enterprise environment on Windows, but I can't do these few things, and that's where the PowerShell stuff is going to kind of fill that gap. Any questions on any of that? Go ahead.
For the DISM module, does
Yep.
that support like configuration options, XML, stuff like that for the features that you're enabling and the roles you're enabling?
So what I've done with those in the past is I've templated XML. So unlike a lot of the config files where, like we could do, earlier when I was showing you that magic, like Puppet resource SSHD config, right? Well, or even all the Augeus stuff. Like those are all set up in a very specific way, and in a Windows world, XML is like, I can't even say it on mic because we're in a public place. But I just template it. And then you can kind of switch those things out, and then it's just a file resource, right? Then it's just a Puppet file, ensure present, put it here. Any other questions? Nope, cool. Oh, I have one other thing I want to show that I forgot to put in my slide deck. So one of the other really big pieces, and this is for folks who aren't super familiar with DSC, how many have heard of DSC, know what it is, never heard of it before? Okay, cool. So DSC is kind of Windows or Microsoft's way of kind of entering the 21st century. And this is basically PowerShell. This is, I think this is using like, what is it, like No, it's not WMI, it's like the WMF, or Windows Management Framework 4.0, so it's basically 2012 and up. You can retrofit this to work on 2008, but 2003 is totally out of the question. But basically, this is a standard format for all Microsoft products going forward. So when you think of Microsoft, right, there's like the Office guys, the Azure guys, the SharePoint guys, and all those different business units. They've all been mandated that they have to create DSC content for those things, right? So one of the things is like Puppet Labs, like we have like 350 employees. Like there's no way we could keep up with Microsoft to create all those different providers to install all these different applications, right? Microsoft's gonna know it better. They've got 100,000 employees that they can do it. So what we've done is this module is a community contributed module. This person has just agreed to give it to Puppet Labs. So we now own this. So this will be a Puppet supported module. Essentially, this allows us to use the DISM, or not DISM, but the DSC protocol to install all the things that I just showed you all through DSC. So you'll notice all the Windows features, those have been implemented so far. You can get an idea of all the different things you can do right now through the DSC resource kit. But basically going forward, it's like, I want to install Microsoft Office. Well, that would be a DSC resource in Puppet that just says Microsoft Office 2012, ensure installed. That's it, right? Pretty cool stuff. DSC, when we first saw it, so Puppet saw it like a year and a half ago, and we saw this language and we're like, huh, that looks a lot like Puppet code.
They read the docs and they were like, they copied and pasted our docs.
Right, it's literally identical. Like the difference between DSC and Puppet code are the commas at the end of a attribute for a particular resource. That's it, right? It was amazing. And so, a lot of conversations happened, much higher above me. And so, we've aligned with Microsoft. This is their direction going forward. And so in terms of kind of future proofing and being, putting your money with a tool that's going to align with the future, the future of Microsoft itself, we're definitely there and trying to stay ahead of the curve. Go ahead.
A couple items. So SQL Server 2012
Mhm.
works with DSC, right? Okay. And
Yep.
then one challenge that I've had, particularly on Windows systems, is managing service account passwords.
Yep.
And not the built-in password accounts, but domain accounts. Do you have any strategies for doing that securely and keeping that encrypted through the entire communication channel in that browser?
All right, so that's a challenge. So with service accounts, so Puppet can actually manage domain account passwords and users. So we can do all those things if you want through this Windows AD module. Again, that would leverage probably something like what Eric mentioned with the EAML. So everything within Puppet, if it's sensitive, we want to abstract that away from your modules and put that in a secure source. So those types of things would be in Hyra, usually encrypted somewhere. Mostly that's going to be like that's going to be a limitation with just the Windows API in general. So the EAML stuff is especially important in a Windows environment. Like for instance, one of the things here, if we do like a Puppet resource user, for instance, here's all the user accounts on my Windows machine, right? You'll notice there's no password here. And that's because the Windows API would return that in clear text. So Puppet actually hides that from you. But I can set the password if I want. But again, we would leverage something else like Hyra to abstract that.
So when the agent runs on the system and creates the catalog and reports that back,
Yep.
we see that in clear text, even if it's encrypted.
So all the communications are all SSL, all certificate signed, all that sort of stuff. And they're also only for that particular agent.
But anybody can go to the dashboard and look at clear text back.
Nope, it would just show a Hyra lookup is all it would show. So in that case, it would just say, Hyra, this is where it is within Hyra. And then if you tried to open that Hyra file without the key, if it's encrypted, it will just be gobbledygook. That's a technical term. Any other questions? Cool. So let's see, we talked about DSC. Again, this AD module is also very cool to take a look at. Usually, I don't hate on AD. I actually kind of like it. I think it's a probably one of the better applications that Microsoft has ever released. But you can manage AD through Puppet. I don't know if I would necessarily recommend it, but just know that the option's out there. If you want, have a single source of truth with everything, right? If it's Puppet, have Puppet manage your infrastructure, not your users, right? Keep that sort of stuff in AD, but just know that the option's out here. And all this stuff was built with PowerShell, right? This is just wrapped PowerShell is all this is. So really, if anything, it's a good proof of concept, right? Because this is saying, hey, there's this really complicated thing out there. We were able to implement it in Puppet just by executing the PowerShell stuff. So I can see everybody's super excited. They're ready to install Puppet on Windows. I can tell. So we have all of these really great resources. We just released a brand new training course for Puppet on Windows. We call it our Puppet Essentials for Windows class. Some of the feedback that we had gotten in the past was, I'm a Windows administrator, I went to Puppet Fundamentals, and it was all Linux-based. So now we offer a Windows-focused Puppet Essentials for Windows class. We also have some pretty good white papers. Eric mentioned earlier, we have this new Windows module pack. So if you're looking to get started with Puppet on Windows, we have basically this module pack where you just Puppet module install, I can't remember what it's exactly. Puppet Labs-Windows, and it comes included with most of the things that you saw here today. So it's going to automatically install this on your master, and then via that plug-in sync mechanism is going to update all of those things for you. So right away, all of your Windows machines they know about that functionality, and you can start using it right away. In terms of one of the things I didn't touch on during my demo, for Puppet Enterprise, one of the really cool things is we have a unified installer for all the different components. So that's where we're a huge differentiator for us between Enterprise and the open source version. Where with open source, I need to figure out the right version of Ruby that runs on this, and I need to get all the other dependencies and all that sort of stuff. For Linux, that's all a big tarball for us that we vendor all those different packages. For Windows, it's an MSI. So we could silently install that. We could push that agent out. It makes it much easier. A lot of folks will use like WinRM to push the agent out or whatever. Very simple in order to bootstrap new Windows agents. We put a lot of work in making that pretty seamless. So. Any other questions that I can help answer? I know there were some Windows folks, and you've been sitting on the edge of your seats waiting for this talk. So fire away. Now's your chance. Oh, yeah, actually, thank you. Thank you for that. Yeah. Man, so check this out. So we can actually, the local security policy module also sets up a provider for that. So again, we could do Puppet resource, local security, pretty sure, nope. Secure it, awesome.
You know it's live.
Yeah. Oh, I know I'm doing it wrong. We read hey, let's read the docs. Probably some pretty good docs on this.
Nobody reads documentation.
I know. It's a feature. Let's see. Oh, it should totally work. But anyways, we can actually execute that, and that will give us all the local security policy stuff. All in Puppet code. We can also do local GPOs if you want. So maybe you have machines that are not connected to the domain for some reason. We could push out GPOs, make sure they're implemented, all that sort of thing. Any other questions? Yep, go ahead. So you're trying to create GPOs with Puppet? Is that right? Yep, I would use Puppet to push out the GPO, not necessarily to create it. Yep.
Are you starting a partnership with other vendors like Redgate or SQL?
I don't think that we've gone that far yet. Like I said, the SQL Server stuff was pretty new for us. That was just released, I believe, in January or December even. So pretty new. One of the really neat things is we have a lot of vendors coming to Puppet, trying to figure out how they can integrate. Microsoft is obviously one of those. So for instance, we're like one of the only vendors integrated into the Azure portal right now through the portal there, and I can kind of show you some of that stuff. Microsoft actually created that for us, which was pretty nice of them. So they have the MS OpenTech guys. Basically, we could spin up all sorts of different Azure resources, all from our Puppet Master. It basically creates this really gnarly string, which is just a big API call to Azure. But one of the really cool things here is I can put this behind a self-service portal, right? Like maybe this is just a bunch of drop downs that builds that really gnarly string for me and then implements it for my devs. There's a lot of flexibility there. Basically, Puppet runs all the Skype and Xbox Live infrastructure at Microsoft. One of our biggest customers, and again, integrated into DSC and all that sort of stuff. So in terms of kind of that more middleware layer implementation, I wouldn't be surprised, but no, it does not exist yet. Good question though. Anything else? All right, who's ready to drink?
Thank you so much.